Hi, my name is Mitch Elkind, and I'm the Chief Clinical Science Officer of the American Heart Association. And I'm joined today by Dr. José Romano, the Interim Chair of Neurology at the University of Miami. And Jose and I really wanted to take a few minutes just to talk about Dr. Ralph Sacco, who recently passed away. And we wanted to share our experiences because both of us were very fortunate to have had the chance to work closely with Ralph. We wanted to share some of that with you. You know, Ralph was really one of the leading vascular neurologists, and in fact, one of the leading neurologists, I think, of recent years, well beloved by his colleagues at the American Academy of Neurology and the American Heart Association and American Stroke Association. And of course, Ralph was the first neurologist to serve as the president of the American Heart Association in 2010. Really an incredible accomplishment for somebody in our field. So maybe, Jose, I'll just talk a little bit about my experiences with Ralph at Columbia University, and then we can talk a little bit about about your work with him in Miami. So I did my stroke fellowship at Columbia. And I joined Ralph for a joint fellowship in stroke and neuroepidemiology. And I remember when I first went down to Columbia to interview, I really had no idea what neuroepidemiology was. I mean, it was just a word that was not in my lexicon at all. But when I met Ralph and he talked about this program that he was running, I was immediately taken in by his energy and enthusiasm, and by his plans for the study he was running called the Northern Manhattan Stroke Study, which was a pretty unique effort to study the burden of stroke in different race ethnic groups living in Northern Manhattan. And Ralph was very passionate about this topic. He was passionate about stroke disparities, and he wanted to get to the bottom of this, and he wanted to reverse those disparities as well. I learned so much from him. I joined Columbia as a faculty member, and Ralph was really a mentor for me over the last 25 years. And even after he left Columbia in 2007 to go to the University of Miami, he continued to be a mentor for me and someone I would call for advice whenever I had a career decision to make, and we certainly collaborated on a number of research projects after that time as well. So Jose, maybe I can give you, a couple of minutes to say your thoughts and impressions when you first encountered Ralph when he came down to Miami.
So Ralph came down to Miami, as you said, in 2007, 2008, joined as chair of the department, and I was already faculty there. But he was one of my late mentors as well. I had previous mentors, but Ralph was a different type of mentor. He really emphasized the importance of research and career development, facilitated my entrance into large clinical trials, helped me write grants. It was really a very different experience in mentorship from what I had before. But my sense of Ralph, in addition to his personal mentorship, was seeing how he had a plan to grow a department. And this was really incredible. During his tenure in Miami, Ralph was able to grow the Department of Neurology now to about 110 faculty members, grow the residency tremendously, now to 44 residents, grow the fellowship programs, and indeed tremendously grow the research programs to the point that almost half of the budget of our department comes from research and research awards. Ralph continued his passion for disparities, which he had already had in Columbia and which you mentioned in North Manhattan, and created the Florida Stroke Registry, which started off as an NINDS grant to look at disparities in acute stroke care in Florida and Puerto Rico. And when that grant finished, through a grassroots effort, he was able to really get the state of Florida to decide that establishing a Florida Stroke Registry was a good idea, and he grew it, and now there's 170 hospitals in the Florida Stroke Registry. And it's not only getting data and analyzing it, but providing the data back to the stakeholders to improve care. And indeed, stroke care has tremendously improved in the state of Florida, in large part due to Ralph and his efforts. What amazes me of Ralph is that he did everything, and he did it well, and he did it with intensity. Ralph not only continued his research while he was chair of a large department, but he found the time to become the president of the American Heart Association, of the American Academy of Neurology, the editor-in-chief of the Stroke Journal. He was also the principal investigator of the Miami CTSI. He was a dean for research at the medical school, and he was able to really empower people to grow. This was really something that I had not seen before, the ability to do multiple things and do them very well. And one of the characteristics of Ralph is that he did this with grace, and he always gave credit to other people in the team. He certainly had a lot to brag about, but he never did on his own. He always included the team and made sure that the team was well supported and it was able to perform at their best.
Wow. So. Yeah, I mean, when you describe all the things that he did, it's a mystery how he had the time to do that. I think he was incredibly well organized, which maybe came from his, I think his mind worked like that of an engineer in many ways. I know he studied engineering in college, and he always seemed to, be able to put things together and organize his time very carefully. I remember when he left Columbia to go to Miami, it took about 4 of us to fill the different roles that he held at Columbia, because nobody could do all of the things that Ralph did. Just thinking about some of the things you said about sharing the credit for things too, I think despite Ralph's enormous reputation and all the things that he did, he was just tremendously humble and such a gracious person. I remember, what stands out to me is an incident where he was at his desk in his office. He was on a conference call with the leaders of a big international trial. It was probably ProFess or one of those trials. 600 sites, many countries around the world, thousands of patients, and there he is, like, really excited to be running this big international trial. And then the moment he got off of that call, he went to the little desk in the corner of his office and sat down with a medical student to go over, an abstract that they were submitting probably to the International Stroke Conference. And he had the same enthusiasm for that interaction that he had for, the big international trial. So I think he really had time for everybody. And we were so fortunate to have that opportunity to have someone who could both achieve at such a high level, but also manifest that kind of humility. Really an exceptional individual.
I think he was really a team builder. I remember that when he came to Miami, he told us that he wanted to get everybody on the bus and make the bus go forward to the right place. So that is one anecdote that I will always remember. The other anecdote that I remember, he was incredibly productive academically, 1,000 peer-reviewed papers or more, and in addition to all of his other leadership activities. But I remember him in the research meetings telling us, quality, not quantity. And he meant papers at that time, abstracts, manuscripts. But I think that that's an analogy to his life as well. He was really impactful. What he did, he left a mark. He did it with high quality. And I think that the people that he touched personally or indirectly, were all benefited by his incredible talents.
Yeah. You know, it's when you said he told everybody to get on the bus and move the bus forward, it reminded me that when he was at Columbia, we applied for the Spotrius grant, which was a specialized programs in translational research in acute stroke. This was, there were multiple Spotrius sites around the country, and Ralph felt that it was important for Columbia to be part of this. If this was going to be a big NIH effort, NINDS effort for acute stroke, that Columbia, his program, should be involved in it. And he brought us all together, and we submitted the grant, and we had to go do a reverse site visit. We all had our team at Columbia had to go down to NIH to be interviewed down there. And we literally got on a bus, and Ralph had hats made that had our Spotrius symbol on the baseball caps. And so we all wore those, and took the 4 or 5 hour bus ride down to Washington for that meeting. But that pulling us all together into a team to carry out this grant, I think, was just so emblematic of the way he brought people together throughout his career. I think about the work that he did with the American Heart Association. We always talk about the Heart Association being a convening organization. We bring groups together, and that is exactly what Ralph did. He was comfortable in every room. He knew how to work with people.
Absolutely.
He was charming. He was funny. He was warm. He was brilliant. And he was able to make individuals, organizations come together as teams to make great things happen. And I think the great advances that we've seen in stroke over the last 25 years of the American Stroke Association are, in no small part due to his efforts. I don't know if you had the same experience.
I completely agree. This team building skill that he had was not only building the team, it was choosing the right people, empowering them, mentoring them, directing them, and then making sure that they became independent. That's a skill that is not easy to attain. And all of this, maintaining his focus on this theme of disparities, but then translating into diversity, into equity. I think that he was very passionate about that. He recruited a number of individuals to the University of Miami from underrepresented minorities, women, made sure to promote people. So I think that aspect of him, of building teams, but also very focused on diversity and equity, was another of his legacy. I think that's an important point to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And as editor-in-chief of Stroke, he set a bar of having 50% of the editorial board be women, people of color, diverse backgrounds, and he didn't just talk the talk. He walked the walk. He actually carried that through and was successful. He had tremendous integrity, and if he said he was going to do something, he was going to do everything he could to make that vision a reality. So just exceptional, really. Jose, you have had the opportunity to, work with Ralph in Miami as he built a home and a life there. I wonder if you have any personal reflections, outside of all the amazing things he did in our field. What stands out to you as a personal recollection of your relationship with Ralph?
So Ralph was very goal-directed at work, but outside of work, he was caring, he was funny, he always wanted to know what was going on with my life, asked about my family, about my wife, about my children. As you know, he had many talents outside of medicine and neurology. He renovated a number of homes, designed them, and built them. He was very proud of that. So I remember talking to him about the home renovation, his frustrations with the contractors, and at the same time asking how my wife was and how I was doing, and making sure that everybody was, that they felt that they were part of a big family. So, I'll miss Ralph not only as a leader, as a mentor, but as a dear friend. He really was a dear friend.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I can just imagine Ralph with the contractors when they get behind. If it was anything like he was with us when we were slow with a paper or grant, he was probably pretty tough on those contractors, I would guess.
I'm sure.
Jose, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and reflections about your time with Ralph. I know we'll both miss him quite a bit.
Can I make one more reflection on him?
Please.
Ralph's life was cut short, but one can only hope to be as impactful as he was. If we were able to leave a mark that is a fraction of the mark that he has left, I'd consider myself lucky.
Yeah, and I know even in his last weeks, Ralph was, I had the chance to spend some time with him, as I know you did too. Even then, Ralph talked about the importance of brain health and his legacy and what he hoped the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the American Academy of Neurology would do to advance his vision of brain health, which was incredible. I thought that even as he was facing his dying days, he was thinking about the future of healthcare and his field and his colleagues. So we'll miss him for that.
We will. We'll miss you very much.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Mitch.